So no, there are some cases that are reported at police. Let's say that you report them today, they are withdrawn the next day because of social pressure. The society kind of condemns those who report cases, and they don't think that these things can happen. But even when they happen, they look for ways of preventing the perpetrators from being brought to book, and which increases this kind of violence. Let me bring you to the cases of domestic violence. We registered over 14,000 cases of violence. The previous year, there were over 17,000 cases. We see a shortfall, yes, in the annual crime report, but this does not mean that the cases did not happen. Very many cases happen, and it is affecting both men and women. The difference is that the number of women that are being affected by these cases is quite high compared to that of men. But we also know that men are victims of violence, and they don't even report. What happens is that they think they can handle on their own, because society says to them that when they face violence, they should be strong. They should act as men. So they also fear to report, for fear of being victimized, for fear of being ashamed. And to them, they think that since they are men, they can handle on their own. And what they do is that when they get overwhelmed, they either commit grave offenses like murder, they engage in other sorts of things, and that's why we see very many cases of violence are increasing in homes. And to some extent, when the women also come out to defend themselves, then things get nasty. So, there are those who believe that maybe this government has empowered women to some extent, and they think that maybe we have it all. No, this violence that we are talking about affects everyone. It doesn't segregate. It doesn't know whether you're a doctor, whether you're a senior police officer, whether you're a lawyer, whether you're tall or short. It affects us all the same. So we need to come out in the strongest terms and make sure that we condemn this kind of violence. I want to also bring you to the statistics of rape. 1,577 women were raped. Now you can imagine. 1,577 women were raped. These are the cases that we received at police. Unfortunately, our laws here in Uganda do not recognize that a man can be raped, but there are some circumstances in conflict situations where they could be raped. But in this case, we are talking about the women. So now we have to come out in the strongest terms, and we condemn this kind of violence. It shouldn't be a discussion of why are we talking about women and girls and leaving out the men. We are also engaging the men and boys to make sure that they protect the rights of the girls and women who are usually the victims. But we have not forgotten the section of men and boys.
All right. Rahom, we've had the picture, a gloomy picture, the statistics that have been shared by Fandatwaire here. But one would ask, why do we have this situation? Why do we continue having this kind of statistics? We have the laws in place. We have the courts. We have the police. What exactly is the gap? What do we need to address to be able to at least bring down some of these bad statistics we are looking at?
Okay, thank you, Kenneth, for that question. So one of the issues that we have is the context that we are in. These laws and these systems and structures do not operate in a vacuum. We have a society, a patriarchal society, that does not see women as equal to men. Women are perceived as lesser, or sometimes they believe that the place of women is in the kitchen. We have seen some people have that mindset that women are supposed to be doing care roles. And so when these laws come and they are supposed to be abided by this society that does not value women, or people who have been raised with that mindset that women are less of human beings, you will see that we have instances where those people find themselves in places of authority. They find themselves in institutions. You will see that you will have what they call systemic violence. So this is where people who are from the patriarchal society come into institutions, even police that is male-dominated, the legal profession that is male-dominated, and start treating women less, and they use the institutions themselves to violate women. They use various forms of oppression. They harass. You'll see very many instances of cases being reported that people are being asked for sex for marks. There was that whole scenario at Makerere University, and there was even a whole committee set up to ensure that girls, mostly girls, are not harassed to have them ask for sex. They are asked for sex by their lecturers, and then they have to to get marks. You've seen in instances of employment, these are educated people. Before you get the job, they're asking for sex. So these are people who are educated, they know the laws, but they are still violating women because they believe that they are better than women, or they have this privilege, what we call male privilege.
Rahom, as you point out, that is there no situation where the girls themselves have offered and said, I can do this if you give me these particular marks? Really?
Okay, now when you look at the whole issue of harassment, there is what they call the power imbalance. So by policy, if someone is in a place of authority, that relationship is something that is outlawed and forbidden by institutional policy.
Okay.
That is why you have instances that someone who is in an organization and they are head of an organization, they cannot start a relationship with the employee. One of them has to leave, even if it is a consenting relationship. I have seen there are bigger institutions which allow for those relationships, but still within the same department, it cannot be allowed because of the power imbalance.
There was a recent ruling in Kenya that actually said that it's okay for workmates to actually relate in that nature. As a lawyer, I think you've seen it. But continue.
I have seen it, but when you come to the Ugandan context, but also that context of the power imbalance where someone is directly supervising you or someone has an authority over you that can easily be abused. So in this instance, you're looking at abuse of power and the liberty and free will of a person to exercise their consent without duress, coercion, all these things which are very hard to prove. But by the virtue of the fact that they have authority over you, you are more susceptible to be abused, and it becomes even worse when you are a woman, because already the society that you're in, there is already that imbalance because of the mindset. The other issue that I want to speak about is also we have gatekeepers of patriarchy that are not men, that they are women. They are women who raise their sons to believe that they are the best things that have ever happened to this world, and women are less of a human being. So you will find that this son is raised in a way not to value women. You'll also see that some of the way that religious institutions interpret the word of authority that they believe in their religious institutions. If it's Islamic, if it's religion, Christian and everything, there is abuse of power that happens when people misinterpret and believe that this is their law, and by virtue of having this as the authority they believe in, they must treat women a certain way. So you will see that violence is perpetuated against women because of all this power imbalance, which is reflected in these institutions, in these structures, in these beliefs, in culture. So it is an issue of the mindset that if you get someone who believes that a woman is less of a human being, even if they are in law enforcement, that someone will come and report that they are being violated, and they will see it as a non-issue. Or they will not listen to the voice of the woman because they do not believe that she has the agency, the autonomy and the power to make a decision by herself, or they do not believe that she can communicate that this is what happened to me, that her word needs to first be verified by a man, or they put her in a position. You've seen cases where women report and they're asking them, what were you wearing? All attention is removed from the perpetrator. They re-victimize a person, but this all speaks to an issue of lack of awareness, or if the awareness is there, the mindset. And mindset change is something that takes a long time. It's a long game that you have to invest in education, you have to invest in knowledge creation, but you also have to invest in getting champions, people that they respect. Now, for example, we have the assistant commissioner here. If she's able to speak to her fellow colleagues in law enforcement, that by the time someone from the outside, the Women's Pro Bono Initiative, comes to do sensitization sessions with police, if within their structure someone has spoken to them, the mindset shift is easier to achieve a mindset shift, because they see someone relatable in the same institution, the same that we have with cultural leaders. That is why we have cultural leaders that we get who are GBV champions. We also have this the way that the Women's Pro Bono does it is from the feminist perspective, the whole issue of male engagement, that we empower men to understand that human rights, it's not a pie, that if you support women to be viewed as equal human beings, that they have dignity, it does not make you less of a person. Because the challenge we have with society now is that when they think that when women are empowered, they are taken away from. Yet, gender equality benefits us all. I am here and I'm able to represent women in court. I am able to render a service and help women because someone believed in me, that I am able to study law because I can study it, not because women cannot do law. And in that end, I am contributing to the economy. I am paying taxes. So when I pay my taxes, doesn't the government accept it? They don't say this tax comes from a woman. It accepts it. The contribution that women are making to the agricultural sector, they are the majority. All of this is being made possible because they are being viewed as people who can make a contribution. But this empowerment, if we have more equality in the picture, would be fair, because gender equality benefits us all.
All right, Spectrum on Radio 1 FM 90. Our topic of discussion today, we are reflecting on the 16 days 16 days of activism against gender-based violence. I'm speaking to two guests who are here in studio. One lost their lives. We have had people whose future have been shattered because of the bad acts that have occurred to them. So stay tuned to Radio 1 FM 90. We'll continue after the break. Well, thank you so much for staying with us on Spectrum, live on Radio 1 FM 90. Our topic today, how can we tackle the menace of gender-based violence, taking into account the ever-alarming situation? We have just got statistics shared out by Miss Maureen Atuhaire, Assistant Commissioner of Police, who is the head of Child and Family Protection Department, indicating the gravity of the issue that we have. 14,000 cases of domestic violence were reported last year. We had 142 teachers of primary schools actually defiling children. We had 1,577 women raped. But worse, we had 383 children defiled by HIV positive men. And we're trying to put into context all these issues to understand what we can actually do to be able to overcome this particular challenge at hand. Miss Maria Rahom Bukirwa, Program Manager, Women's Pro Bono Initiative, is the other guest who joins me and Maureen here in studio. Well, before we went for the break, Maureen had shared some of the challenges, the reasons why we are still this kind of situation persisting. Now, let's try to look at solutions. And Maureen, one of the work that the police does is actually to engage the communities through its community outreach, which is community policing. What kind of issues do you think people are confronted with out there, or what kind of solution do you think can be pushed forward to be able to deal with this particular challenge we are looking at it? One of it is actually enforcing the law, like Maria had suggested, and she seems to say that there is a gap, and that directly falls in your docket.
I don't think there is a gap. To me, we have the laws in place. Actually, we are doing very well. But the structural issues that she has been talking about is the problem. The patriarchal society that we do live in makes everything hard to enforce. For example, we have the Domestic Violence Act, which says that if one's rights are violated, then you're supposed to hold the perpetrator accountable. Then what happens? Say, for example, a woman comes to police to report violence. The community is very quick to blame this woman, to actually condemn this woman for having gone to police to report. So this person is coerced to withdraw the case that was reported the previous day. The family members will say, you're not going to sit comfortably here when our son has been arrested, and then for you, you're going to be eating our food and filling the toilet. Two things: you either forget this family, or you go and withdraw the case that you have just reported.
There's even a case that is trending these days.
Yes.
It's in court, so we may not have much say about it. But we have seen what has been happening, including some sort of mob action on the streets.
Very true. And we do condemn that. Now that shows you how unfair the society can be. They do believe that maybe they have power to do anything that they want to do. There are some people who think that by going to police to report, you're actually exposing their families. Now they are respectable, for example, in their community. Now you're here spilling all the secrets. But domestic violence is no longer a private affair. It's a public issue, and that's why these laws were put in place to make sure that we hold the perpetrators accountable. So those who threaten, those who go to police to report cases, they're actually also committing another crime, because threatening violence is a case. And once you get to be reported at police, you can also be arrested. So we have a society that is quick to blame, is quick to condemn people, and then they're like, but you, woman, what kind of woman are you? You're so cold-hearted. How can you go to police to report to your husband that you're being beaten, that there is ABC? They usually say that saying in Uganda, that ebyomunju tebitotora, meaning that whatever happens in the family setting is supposed to stay within the family. It can't be spoken out, that you're just washing your dirty linen in public. And what this means, because they will say, I went, for example, to the LC, I wasn't helped. I was referred to police, I also went to police, they were not of help. So let me do what I can in my power. And you're going to see very many cases of murder, and then you're going to see maybe acid attacks. You're also going to see so many cases of mob action, and which is not good for our country. So there is no country that develops when a section of its people's rights are being violated. And we have said that all these, once they happen, they can affect the economic development of the country. And we are seeing that we shall be spending a lot of money on investigating these cases. We spend a lot of money on medical examination of the victims and the perpetrators. Then we spend a lot of it in investigation, in transportation, and we are using a lot of money to investigate these cases. Center for Domestic Violence Prevention is one of the NGOs that carried out a study on how much money we lose when we are responding to cases of domestic violence. It estimates 77 billion shillings that are spent annually to respond to these cases. Now, instead of the government prioritizing things like education, health, and other things that could take this country forward, we are instead dedicating this money to this violence. I'm not saying that we shouldn't dedicate this money to investigating these cases, but is this what we want at this level? Yes, it has happened. There is nothing we have to do. We have to investigate them, but we have to raise awareness in the communities to know that once their rights are violated, they are free to go anywhere and report.
All right.
Yes.
I find that before I actually go to Rahom, let's get into this family setup where this violence is happening. You know, you meet two people, they fell in love, they married, started a family. What goes wrong? What happens? What do you think happens to lead to these particular challenges? What could be the main drivers in the family? Apart from patriarchal, which you have already stated.
In the beginning, you're in a dating phase. I meet you maybe at some cafe or at some restaurant, or I meet you in any other place. We just see ourselves for a few hours and we go back home. You go to your home, I go back to my home. I've not had this time to stay with you, to know how you behave, to know what your goals are, to know what your interests are. We are basically strangers. But when we come together, we start studying each other. Then you realize that there are certain things that I cannot be able to put up with. How does this happen? It still goes back to the process of socialization. How was I raised? We are two consenting adults raised in different societies, and every home has its own culture. A culture is a way of doing things. So I'm raised in a different way. I'm told this is what we do. This is how women behave. Maybe this is the way we do things. You also you got raised up in a different environment. Here we come, and when we stay together, you're going to tell me this is how things are done, and I'm also going to tell you no, this is how things are done. And there is a conflict because I'm not believing in your ideology, neither are you believing in mine. So we may not be able to stay together because we simply disagree on a few things. She already also hinted on the notion of having rights. There's some people who believe that a woman doesn't have any rights. Who are you to talk in public? Who are you to question a man on his decisions? Who are you to do ABC? Like, you have to give accountability, yet it's not the same thing when it comes to a man. So you find that these differences kind of bring into this kind of violence. But also, we have extramarital affairs where maybe a woman cheats on the husband, and the husband also does the same thing.
Revenge.
It may not be revenge, but maybe they just have these other affairs and they don't trust their partners. This can also be a breeding ground for violence to take place. And once this sets in, of course, there is mistrust. And it is very hard to trust someone once this trust is broken.
All right.
Yes.
Rahom, let's hear some recommendations. What are some of the things that you think need to be done to be able to respond very quickly to some of these challenges? Your organization, one of the things it does is it looks at the laws, how the laws are being applied. Are there gaps? What else do we need to do? We have situations in communities. Are you engaging communities? What exactly can we do as a country to be able to respond effectively?
Thank you very much. So one of the things that we need to do and continue doing that we do not tire of, that's why we are here each year, every day, speaking about these issues that women face, is the sensitization. And it also has to come from an informed perspective. There's a lot of misinformation out there about what are women's rights. Women's rights are human rights. What we are trying to say here, that women should be accorded the respect that they deserve simply because they are a human being. They are human beings. But there is a lot of misinformation out there. You have seen the trend of toxic masculinity, that once someone comes out to speak about women's rights issues, the first thing that other people do is that, what about the men? What about this? But the Assistant Commissioner has shown the statistics, and we are filling a gap. It is also our mandate as women's rights organization to speak about the human rights issues that women face. And speaking about gender issues does not take away anything from the men otherwise, other than that, actually, on the contrary, it contributes. It contributes. Gender equality benefits us all. We should not leave anyone behind. And women historically have been left behind. The violence that is meted out against them is disproportionate. the key word being disproportionate. So we need to look at the issue of misinformation. Even as we create awareness, the issue of misinformation, that there are people out there who spread misinformation on what are women's rights. The other thing that we need to do is investment, money. I'm a believer of the word. Money answers all things. So we need to invest in gender justice. We need to invest in things that benefit women. We need to invest in law enforcement to ensure that they are carrying out all the things they need to carry out, enforcing these laws, but also it's resource intense to go out into the community, sensitize them, but also having friendly economic structures within our society. You have seen the issues that happen towards elections. There's a lot of inflation, there are a lot of economic issues, and that breeds ground for violence. The other thing that we need to do is in the issue of socialization. How do we incorporate this issue of gender justice into our socialization through the culture, through engaging religious leaders, through engaging parents at home? It is something that is intersectional. Women and girls, we do not live single issue lives. We coexist together with the men. We live in society together. So in all these aspects, when we are creating awareness about the issues that women face, we need to also be alive on the roles that the other gender plays in ensuring that the violence against women is not increased. But also the other thing that we need to do is to know and explain to them what is their role in this fight. It is a fight that we are doing together. The theme is unite. We need to unite, but almost every year whenever we come to speak about this issue of ending violence, it is a misconception that women are coming out to fight men. No, we are fighting the issue. So the laws as they are gender neutral. If you look at the Domestic Violence Act that she has spoken about, if anyone commits an offense, it says anyone. And sadly, what happens is men are the majority committing these offenses. So we need to ensure that there is sensitization, investing in education. Once you educate the girl child, it is something that enables her to make an autonomous decision about her life, and she's able to contribute to the economy. She's able to make free, informed decisions, and she's able to safeguard herself from situations that will end up leading her into violence.
All right, Spectrum on Radio 1 FM 90. Let's now get the feedback that is coming in from the listeners, and we have already a number of comments. Let me begin with this one that comes in from Bernard, who writes in and says, "Good evening, Spectrum. Violence against women is real but not limited to women. Many men are suffering from violence by their wives, which has led to many men dying early enough, leaving orphans and widows. I would rather prefer the title to the topic to be domestic violence, not tagged to gender based, tagged to gender." That's Bernard, who is listening in from Kawempe. Would you like to respond to Bernard? Very quickly, I'll begin with you, Afande Atwairi.
Yes, I need to give this clarification that gender-based violence is inflicted on someone because the person is either a male or female. And domestic violence is a form of gender-based violence. But remember, we are discussing about elimination of violence against women and girls, specifically in these 16 days of activism. The campaign has begun today. It is the international day when the whole world is looking at eliminating this kind of violence. So let's not tilt this discussion. We are looking at this violence in terms of numbers. Maybe let me paint a picture on the victims of violence that we are talking about. For example, when it comes to domestic violence, we have about 15,184 victims of violence that were affected last year. And we see that the numbers are increasing when it comes to the victims who are women. It is 10,000 792 women. And we're also seeing an addition of 644 girls. I acknowledge that, yes, men are facing violence. The boys are also victims of violence. But the numbers are so minimal compared to the women and girls. So we are saying that the women and girls are increasingly being affected by these cases, but we also know that the men are victims. So what are we supposed to do? We want to engage the men not as perpetrators this time, but we want to engage them as holders of power. We want to engage them as fathers. We want to engage them as champions, as people who are supposed to use their power positively to make sure that we work together. We unite, like it is saying. We unite and make sure that we put an end to this kind of violence.
All right, we have a comment coming in from David. David says that women activist panelists are aware that men have suffered a lot of violence from women using sex to lure men to giving them jobs, run away from their marriages, demanding money from men by duress, a young boy forced to provide security to an adult woman at night, etc. Why should gender activists always generalize all men as the only perpetrators of gender-based violence? That's almost the same comment, and I'll come to you, Rahom, because we have had a take already from Atuhaire.
Thank you, Kenneth. This is the misinformation that I'm speaking about. We have highlighted that the men are the majority of the perpetrators. I have stated that the laws are quoted in neutral language, that if anyone does any offense, they are held accountable to the law. Majority of the perpetrators are the men. And if you even look at the people who suffer violence, it's women who are disproportionately affected. So I understand where this comes from, but we need to also engage men to fight against this narrative of toxic masculinity that thinks that every time that you elevate a woman or empower a woman, that you are taking away from society, yet in essence you are contributing to society.
All right, we have another comment coming in from Albert Wandera, who says, good evening. Please tell the guest in studio to read Quran or Bible, then she will get all she is advocating for. I talk as a parent of both genders. What is happening in Uganda is not gender equality, but women stealing from men. When you're poor, they say you are useless. When you become rich, they send you to your grave. Beauty has sent most of them to marriages, but character is busy sending back to their parents. That's a comment that comes in from Albert Wandera. There are a couple, so let me read them out. Michael Peter writes in, good evening, Kenneth. Thank you for hosting the two ladies today. I think they have clearly painted the picture of how big a problem we have on our hands in GBV. I think the greatest challenge is attitudes, culture, and mindset. This to me calls for a lot of investment in actions that will bring about mindset change. And that is a long-term consistent investment and should target all sectors, all ages, all socioeconomic groups, and ethnicities. That's Michael listening in from Gayaza there with that comment. Then we have another one. Good evening. Thank you for the program. Robert from Hoima. My question is directed to the police commissioner. How do you handle a scenario where a man is harassed, slapped by a woman, and she's the very person rushing to report because they have higher chance to be heard than the men? The scenario happened where a lady first got drunk and went to the neighbor and attacked him with a force. When he tried to defend himself, he was taken to prison. That's a comment coming in from Hoima. Thank you very much for joining us all the way from the oil city. We have another comment coming in. Good evening, Anderson. Thank you for the show and hosting today's guest. My comment about the topic gender-based violence, this particularly directed to the SCP police, Maureen. Most often we have seen your male police officers manhandling women political activists and touching them inappropriately during arrests. Yet we are aware as a police you are supposed to be custodians of law and yet to become the perpetrators. The comment is a little bit long. Don't you think even reporting such matters to police is as good as discussing the causes of malaria with the mosquito itself? 2, we have seen many women seeking custody of their girl children, especially when in a strained relationship, purportedly that their biological father could rape them, and yet when they move to new relationships, the new father, stepfather, becomes a predator on both the mother and the girl. What measures as lawyers have you taken to protect such vulnerable children entangled in such a situation? That's Kamugo Fred Keta listening in from Kira municipality. Then we have another comment coming in from Charles, who writes in and said, hello, Kenneth. Thank you. You know, it's so unfair to always have a world as one-sided. There are men who face domestic violence abuse, etc. It doesn't happen on women alone, but men too. Some men are just quiet and silent. That's Charles listening in from the UK. Thank you very much for joining us, Charles, all the way from the UK. We have another comment coming in from Moses. Thanks for the show. Considering the increased cases of gender-based violence in our country, despite the annual commemoration of the 16 days of activism, GBV over the years, what is the significance of commemorating the 16 days of activism? What's not being done right? That is Moses Mukundane listening in from Chira. Very quickly, let's respond to some of these comments that have come across. I'll begin with you, Maureen.
Thank you. There is a gentleman who was concerned about being arrested unfairly, yet it's the woman who is being on the wrong side. Yes, this happens. Some women come to police while reporting their partners. They may give you their version of their story, and you're not going to say you're lying at that stage. But when you go into investigation, you actually realize that it's the man who is a victim of violence. And when we quickly find out that it's the man actually who is a victim of violence, definitely it has to turn the other side to the woman, because we know that men do not report. In most cases they are silent, and in most cases they are violated. Do you know what they do these days? They simply pick a few shirts and trousers and they leave the home completely. They abandon their families, not because that they want, but because they are facing violence in their homes. Yes, we are very aware. It is very unfortunate if that man was arrested and taken to prison. Maybe investigations were not done so well, but in most cases we have to investigate and make sure that we find who the predominant aggressor is. Another person talked about what's not being done. Why are we talking about this? I just read the statistics that keep on increasing every other year. That shows us that there is something that is not being done. Probably people are ignorant of the laws. They are ignorant of where they are supposed to seek services from. If you do not want to come to police, you can go to any civil society organization, or you could go to a probation officer, or go to the secretary for children affairs, that is the one who is commonly known as a Nabachala, or you can go to a neighbor, to any person who can help you.
Right.
But we are seeing that things are going wrong, and women and girls are the ones mostly affected.
Right.
That's why we have to keep on raising awareness. We sing a song every other year so that we can save a life.
All right. Maria, you'll have the final say on this topic as we come to the end of this show. Your closing remarks, as also you respond to some of the comments that have come across.
Okay, thank you so much. Now, the thing about mindset change, as one of the listeners noted, it's something that's of long-term investment, and part of the long-term investment is continually educating the masses, like these shows that we are having about the issue of gender-based violence, the violence against women. We are advocating for the progressive laws. You have seen the discussion on the marriage bill, that we are having discussions to ensure that the rights of women and also the rights of all are protected within that setting. It is something that needs to be done continuously and invested in. The issue of misinformation, you have seen even the evidence of the misinformation from some of the comments of the listeners, but this is something that we do not tire. The other thing that we are doing is providing legal aid services. We are using legal tools, the criminal justice system, to ensure that we follow up cases of violence, to ensure that they come to their conclusion, but also educate the masses about how the legal systems work.
Right.
Because there's a lot of ignorance, but this is a journey that needs all stakeholders involved, and we believe that we shall achieve a place where women can live free of violence.
All right, very quickly, Ms. Atwaire, there's something hanging that you wanted to respond to?
Yes, there is one of the listeners who raised an issue about custody of children, and these are some of the things that really escalate violence. But I want to let listeners know that a man can also raise children even if they are girls, but there is a procedure that we do follow. You have to apply for custody or visitation rights from the Family and Children Court. Police does not not have the mandate to decide who stays with the children, but you're supposed to handle this with the probation officers or the family court.
All right. Right, with that, we come to the end of Spectrum today. Thank you very much, ladies, for making time to be here in studio. And thank you very much, dear listeners, for tuning in and contributing to this discussion. There are 16 days of activism, and we will still have another round of discussion about this issue where we also have men represented to be able to have a dynamic discussion about these issues. From me here in the studio, it's a good night, but stay tuned to Radio 1 FM 90. We have the news in English coming up with Miss Josephine Dagano. Thereafter, there will be a Soul Train by BB.